before you see, it was I.
If you've been paying any sort of attention to the world of online gaming, you might have noticed a recent movement. #FixTF2. To give a brief explanation, Valve Corporation's online video game, Team Fortress 2, has been plagued by a major bot problem in recent years, with many trolls hosting bots that invade a server en masse and do things like instantly headshot real players, spam abuse over text and voice chat, force kick other players, forcibly crash servers, and run scams to cheat people out of their money. To put things lightly, things are kind of a mess. Now, this isn't a recent phenomenon. It's unclear exactly when this first started, but the player base has been dealing with the bot problem for some years now via vote kicks and community servers. But these were merely temporary stopgaps that were insufficient to deal with such a long-term issue. In hopes of a more permanent solution, the game's community had previously organized the movement #SaveTF2 back in 2022, where a legion of players and content creators produced a collective rallying call across multiple platforms to garner public attention and pressure Valve into action. It succeeded. Valve responded. After some time, Valve implemented new protective measures, and for a few months, it worked. The bots had gotten blocked, people could play in peace, life was good. But that didn't last. After some time, the bot makers found ways around these protective measures, and eventually the situation had returned back to square one. And so, history repeats itself. A mere 2 years after the first movement, a second movement is now being organized, this time including an online signed petition and mass review bombing on Steam, Helldivers style.
I love democracy.
Now, even though I've played Team Fortress 2 for several years, I'm not a TF2 focused content creator, so I'm not really any sort of figure within that community at all. In fact, I don't specialize in any one game at all. Those of you who do watch my channel will know that I'm a former game designer turned business graduate student. I'm not from America, I've never had the honor of working at Valve, and if my real life identity ever gets made public and connected to this channel and video, I'll likely never get hired there, ever. I just have an interest in talking about game design topics from a game developer's perspective based on my own personal experience from studying and working with game design. And that's what we're talking about today. The extremely complex issue of TF2's bot problem and Valve's corporate hierarchy. We'll break this down into 4 parts. Why exactly are bots and cheaters such a problem? What solutions do companies utilize to address them? Why does Valve do nothing? And what does this mean for the future of Team Fortress 2 and other Valve games? Before we begin, I will clarify, I'm not a Valve defender or apologist, and I am not doom posting or wishing for TF2's downfall. I just want to stress that this is a deceptively complex issue which is near impossible to viably solve for many reasons. I just wish to attempt to explain as much about this complex issue as possible, from the problem, to the company, to the solutions, to the limitations of those solutions. What conclusion you arrive at is on you. The only thing I'm going to convince you on is that this issue is complex. That's it. Now, let's open with this question. Why do players wish to cheat and ruin other people's fun in a free game with no tangible reward or benefit? Regrettably, this is a simple yet disgusting answer. Some people just suck. See, a game environment is like a microcosm of society. People from all sorts of cultures in one place, all interacting with one another, cooperating and competing over various goals. And just like with any society, some people are just bad. Whether due to personal desire for dominance, personal or psychological issues, or just simply having a callous disregard for others, some people just cannot behave when left to their own devices and derive enjoyment from causing misery and suffering onto others. The psychological motivations behind griefing, trolling, toxicity, and other deplorable game behavior are numerous and have been extensively studied by researchers and university students alike for the past several decades. We don't need to delve too deep in this. What we need to care about is the game developer's perspective. Player taxonomy is a commonly taught concept in game design, one which any game designer should be aware of. Game companies are generally well aware that there exists a subset of players in any game who will people seek to ruin a game experience for others. Such players represent a critical problem for online multiplayer game developers because the majority or entirety of a multiplayer game experience is derived from player interaction. For single-player games, the huge majority of a game experience is kept isolated to each individual player. And for co-op games, the experience is limited to a small group of players. Developers of such games won't care if these players decide to cheat and mod their own game, because it only compromises the game experience for themselves or their friends and affects nobody else. It's like cheating at weekend golf. The only people that cheating affects is you and your friends playing with you. There's no score tracker or accountability, so you can absolutely lie and say you've hit a birdie or hole-in-one on every hole, and nobody will know or care. All that player accomplishes is ruin the game for themselves and their golfing buddies. Such cheating is so pointlessly meaningless that I can't think of anybody who'd actually be dumb enough to bother doing it. But cheat on a public televised golf tournament and it's a whole different story. The game is now being played by multiple competitors and has real stakes, meaning that cheating here affects other people and compromises the viewer's trust and integrity in the entire event. This same principle applies in live service video games. Trolling and toxic behavior in a multiplayer live service game ruins the experience for many other players, and if such behavior continues unchecked, it can gradually poison the overall game's experience. Over time, this results in players being pushed away and the game garnering a negative reputation. If left unchecked, this can sink a game. Online multiplayer-only live service games rely heavily on large player counts to keep game servers filled and players happy. If players are scared away by a negative experience, overall player count dwindles and the game enters a downwards population spiral. To ensure this doesn't happen, game companies and developers need to take active measures to prevent and punish such behavior. Players who derive enjoyment from trolling do not do so for any practical or rational reason. Oftentimes, they just do it out of a sense of boredom or because they find it fun. So it is up to the developers to create a practical reason against such behavior. In a society, people who are generally unable to behave are kept in check by societal law and order. If you vandalize a car, steal a traffic sign, or stab and assault someone, you'll get punished as per either the government's laws or by private lawsuits. Crude as it may sound, it is only the threat of consequences that forces some people to behave. This is the duty which a game's developers need to fulfill, to serve as the law and order needed to create a safe gaming environment for regular players. Normally, such foul play can be handled via measures such as temporary suspensions, permanent account bans, currency reversions, or a loss of player privileges. However, games such as TF2 face a unique problem because they are free-to-play multiplayer games. In paid multiplayer games, every player has a financial stake because they paid money for that game. Getting temporarily or permanently banned will hurt because they effectively wasted their real-world money. This creates a natural disincentive to cheat and a punishment which hurts the cheater's wallet if they do. However, free games lack this. Getting banned in these games has little meaning because the player can just create an alternate email and register a new account. There is no consequence behind the threat of a ban. TF2's design structure of being a free-to-play game and casual lobbies means there are no progression rewards like rank that actually matter. This serves to make it an amazing casual game experience, but it also means that accounts have no value. The value of a TF2 player's account comes from their in-game inventory and games in their Steam account, but a brand new player has nothing. This is what enabled the bot problem. Creating a Steam account and downloading TF2 is free. Getting banned costs nothing, so there's zero cost for a troll to indulge their worst impulses and zero consequences for them getting caught. Free-to-play live service games are generally more difficult to issue bans for because the player base is frankly huge. Trying to maintain order and investigate cheating cases in such a huge player base is a significantly more difficult challenge compared to the smaller player base of a paid game. However, it is more difficult, not impossible. It's still doable. It requires constant vigilance, with a team of QA and developers assigned to regularly process cheater reports, issue bans, and constantly update their anti-cheat systems to block out cheater activity. But this task is an endless one. The world is large, and there is no shortage of people who want to screw over others for petty and meaningless reasons, especially in an environment like a game where there are few real-world consequences. In other words, it's like running an endless treadmill. It requires the runner to constantly expend energy to maintain a consistent speed and stay on the treadmill, but the treadmill never stops, and the moment the runner slows down or stops, they'll get sent flying off. It's an endless drain of developer resources, time, and money for the game company to constantly spend, which produces an opportunity cost as those resources do not get used to produce new content or grow the game further. Games such as Fortnite, League of Legends, Hearthstone, and Fall Guys have run this treadmill every day for years, making active attempts to punish toxicity and cheating and maintain order. And well, the results are mixed. Some handle the treadmill better than others. Still, while they aren't perfect, it's still far better than leaving these problems unchecked. These measures still help to reduce the potential damage. It's a boring, unexciting, and frustrating job, but one that's necessary for the sake of the game, players, and eventually the company's financials. So now that we have a better understanding of what the problem is, the solutions that other games take, and what those solutions require, we can talk about Valve. Why has Valve not done anything about Team Fortress 2 for years? This is where the problem's complexity skyrockets. Let's go over this step by step. In most companies, people are typically assigned to teams and roles under management based on their project's needs. For example, if a project requires additional manpower, management will temporarily assign staff from another project to support it. Every game company has their own hierarchy, work culture, teams, and development timelines. But a similar corporate hierarchy exists everywhere and is a structure which the company is built around. There's always superiors, bosses, project managers, dedicated HR staff, and so on. But Valve is special. Its corporate hierarchy is unusual and stands out as an exception even among exceptions. Valve famously lacks such formal hierarchy and has a flat hierarchy. Nobody reports to anybody else. Valve developers have no traditional management, are allowed to move to whatever project they want, create whatever they want, and even their desks come with wheels so they can move to any part of the building they want whenever they want. Developers at Valve are given total freedom to choose their project, innovate, and work on new games and technologies without needing to report to any sort of middle or upper management, and are encouraged and rewarded for doing so. By cutting out middle management and exclusively hiring experienced, talented, and driven developers, in theory, Valve's flat hierarchy maximizes the potential productivity that these highly driven developers can achieve. It cuts out all the fat and results in a self-sufficient company run by the best of the best, with nobody needing to waste time telling anybody else what to do, maximizing individual flexibility and efficiency by cutting out all the sluggish middlemen of management. However, in practice, such a structure comes with many severe flaws, many of which are covered by former Valve employees themselves in this article from tech blog Dunia Media's Ong Ka-jin, which was published in 2018. From my own perspective as a game designer turned business student, Valve is not a perfect game developer utopia to work in. It's just like any other company and has its own set of pros and cons. In fact, this unusual hierarchy creates some unique benefits and problems which are not present in other companies. Nobody reports to anybody else, huh? Well, look at it this way. When nobody is your superior, that means everybody else is your competitor. Without formal corporate hierarchy and management to supervise, limited bonuses and credit get distributed based solely on your colleagues' peer reviews, and it creates an environment for political backstabbing. Help the wrong person out and you risk them taking credit credit for your help. Reveal personal information and you risk offending someone and making an enemy. Working on a project, resources are limited, so a rival team may try to get your project cancelled so they get more resources to themselves. These are problems that naturally exist in other companies, from all sorts of industries, even outside gaming. But it's magnified in Valve because management exists in those companies to handle these decisions and problems. In another company, if you accidentally annoy someone from another team, that has little impact on your existing work, and the decisions on whether your current project gets cancelled or supported is decided by management rather than among peers. As a developer, the stress of project survival or cancellation does not weigh on your mind as heavily because that decision is made by upper management and is mostly out of your control anyway. But because Valve has no such management, these issues get brought down to the level of the individual developers to deal with, which indirectly cultivates an environment of survival of the fittest. You learn to code defensively, never reveal vulnerable personal information about yourself to coworkers, never ask for help unless it's absolutely necessary, and seek favor with those who lead cliques. Make your code clear and understandable. That means you as a developer are expendable and no longer needed. To survive, you need to write complicated code that only you can understand, meaning you cannot be gotten rid of. And make no mistake, you are very expendable. Thanks to Valve's sterling reputation as a game maker, there's an endless line of highly skilled developers who would love to take your spot. And that line will never end thanks to Valve's reputation and marketing. You see this? The leaked Valve company manual? It's a slick, stylishly presented text which Valve themselves put out as bait to make their company seem more attractive. Prospective developers will research Valve, stumble across this, get convinced their research work was great, and fall for the bait. While Valve employees do try to stick to this manual if possible, it's still bait regardless. Articles talking about how amazing it is to work at Valve, good PR. Valve hires a specialist on a short-term contract, treats them well, they write a good review, then they leave in peace after the contract is completed. This is the company equivalent of a top-level university with no teachers, where lessons, exams, and grades are all handled by top students who self-study. This succeeds because Valve, by their own admission, almost exclusively hires senior-level developers for permanent positions. People with loads of experience and skill, with a strong passion for games, who have the capability and independence to work without guidance or management. Valve's corporate structure isn't all cons and no pros. As mentioned before, its main goal was to enable freedom to encourage innovation, and it successfully does so. Valve's reputation as an industry leader is well deserved, and their unique corporate hierarchy allows for individual levels of freedom and flexibility that can yield results which other, more rigid companies cannot. Steam is the amazing platform it is today because Valve's culture encourages and rewards developers for creating and adding new features onto it. And when Valve's developers do manage to put a project to completion, the results are impressive. Valve employees aren't social manipulators and malicious backstabbers. They are genuinely passionate and friendly game makers with a drive to excel. These are not bad people. No company is perfect, and especially not any game company. Valve just traded out a conventional set of pros and cons for its own unique build. In many ways, Valve can actually be one of the best game companies to work for. Valve is a company for gamers, made by gamers. Almost every person who works at Valve is also a gamer and has a passion for gaming, meaning every person involved in any decision-making process understands the needs and wants of a gamer. And since the company is privately owned and not publicly listed, all of Steam's revenue and profits are directly reinvested back into the company and its people, letting them invest into risky and experimental projects and pay their employees big bonuses, sometimes as big as a whole year's worth of salary. In other words, there's no public shareholders which Valve needs to pay dividends to, who may pressure the company into short-term profit-making decisions, and no corporate CEOs that only know about business and profitability but have zero actual knowledge or care about their company's industry, workforce, user base, or gaming in general, which are problems that plague other big game companies like Activision Blizzard. At the end of the day, things at Valve end up the way they are because human dynamics are just naturally really complicated. The lack of formal hierarchy just makes this even more so. Valve's and TF2's problems are mostly an unfortunate natural consequence more than anything. Let's say you were underperforming recently. Under a standard hierarchy, you would be sat down by a manager or superior, get told your problems, and have to shape up. That superior bears the responsibility for evaluating you, explaining your issues, and, if necessary, eventually firing you. At Valve, that superior is instead replaced by a group of your peers, which may just casually drop a minor comment over lunch. And that makes things very awkward and uncertain. You don't know exactly what went wrong or how to correct it, and you don't know exactly who to check in with for a second opinion. And since everyone is an equal peer, nobody has the authority to validate themselves, meaning these conversations can become painfully awkward and are sometimes avoided. This creates a degree of uncertainty that can be stressful. Getting told off by a superior is a painful experience, and one I'm personally familiar with because I've messed up before. But at least your screw up is clearly laid out in front of you. And inversely, if your superior doesn't have an issue with you, you have the peace of mind knowing that things are fine. But at Valve, you don't have a superior, so there isn't any one person who is going to tell you there's a problem, meaning you don't know when things have gone wrong until it's too late. Worst of all, your peers might not even be dishonest or have any malicious agenda. Valve operates on a stacked ranking system, meaning every once in a while, employees get called in to discuss and rank the performances of 10 other employees who they've worked with over that period. And since humans are naturally flawed and forgetful, they might overlook that employees' more boring day-to-day duties and only remember their big, notable, flashy accomplishments. So they leave an unremarkable review, which Valve then takes and uses to evaluate employee performance and distribute bonuses. These people meant no harm, but they might have inadvertently screwed someone over unintentionally. After all, since it's a ranked system, someone has to be last. You might just say, oh, just be a good employee and don't underperform. The thing is, what defines underperformance? After all, with no hierarchy, there's no guidelines and a superior to establish standards. There's no one boss who you can ask, have I been doing well? Or what do you think I could do better at? The definition of good performance is dependent on everyone else around you and is thus highly subjective because everyone has different standards. So everyone needs to constantly prove themselves to others. The lack of hierarchy means you never truly know if you are performing okay, because the standards of okay are defined by the many different talented people around you. Even genuinely valuable people at the company may feel insecure and concerned because there's a lack of certainty and thus peace of mind. Again, I stress, these aren't bad people, humans are just complex. Valve is like the Wild West, and everyone's a lone ranger. With no societal order in place, every man is responsible for their own fate. Some people may truly love and thrive in such environments with no restrictions, while others may feel concerned and band together for added security. But at the end of the day, nobody's hand is ever too far from their gun. Now to you, dear viewer, you are a developer, you're a player. How do Valve's corporate matters affect TF2? Well, That corporate structure means nobody will ever want to work on it. If you are a Valve developer, not only is working on old projects discouraged, it's also actively detrimental to your career progression. Maintenance on old games is a boring and necessary job which is needed to keep a live service game running smoothly and thus keep that revenue stream flowing. But they aren't actively creating any value in a flashy or noticeable way. Choosing to work on an old game like TF2 means you aren't following the group, don't get to hang with the cool kids, and don't get to make big achievements that can earn you big bonuses and fame. In a conventional company, people don't get that choice. Management assigns them a job with clear metrics and objectives, it gets done, and the person moves on to a new task. Management would then credit and acknowledge their assigned job was completed as per their instruction. But since Valve has no such management, nobody is forced to work on the game. People can choose what to do, meaning they'll prioritize projects that have the best potential for security or bonuses. Under Valve's flat hierarchy, when a performance review rolls around, a developer who has worked on riskier and more ambitious projects will be remembered and ranked highly as a result. But a developer who's just been quietly working on TF2 flies under the radar and gets an unremarkable ranking, because it's difficult for other employees to see and remember how impactful their actions are. Maintenance and repair are just naturally less flashy than making something new. In a normal company, management could assign younger, less experienced staff to live operations and maintenance work, and assign the more valuable developers to more important projects. Live ops work is less exciting grunt work, sure, but it is also more stable than projects under development, and thus serves as a good place to train new developers and designers. However, Valve literally cannot do this. As mentioned before, Valve only hires the best of the best, which in turn means they have a non-existent supply of inexperienced developer manpower to handle intensive grunt work. This is why Valve has done nothing about TF2's bot problem. All their developers are just too experienced and valuable that anyone who volunteers to handle TF2 is practically committing career martyrdom. It isn't worth it. Also, there's the code. Because of how Valve's coding culture works, previous developers are incentivized to write code which only they can understand in order to justify their worth to the company. This results in it being overly complicated with different features all using different variables and data instead of setting things up neatly and efficiently. If you dig into TF2's mechanics and the SFM editor, you'll realize things make almost no sense, with various mechanics and features being set up in random and arbitrary ways. TF2 content creators such as Lazy Purple have described the process as nigh insane.
The Wrangler laser has this third control point that controls its color? And this is where the source spaghetti starts. This control point's positional X, Y, and Z coordinates correspond to the laser's red, green, and blue values using a scale of -255 to +255, which necessitates the equation x times 2 minus 255, where x is the RGB value that you want. What? You didn't get that? That's because it makes no fucking sense!
And to a casual player, it seems funny, but to a developer, that's a telltale indicator of deeper issues. End result is that older games like TF2 are not only more difficult to work on, but also less rewarding. Since there's no formal hierarchy, nobody is assigned to deal with the problem, and Valve has few inexperienced developers to throw at the problem anyway. So everyone will just drift off and preferably not acknowledge the problem. I don't have any personal experience with CSGO or Dota 2, so I can't speak to their respective situations. I've been casually told by a few subscribers that they also show signs of abandonment similar to TF2, likely for similar reasons. But I'm not familiar with the specifics of those games, so I'm not confident to say anything more. If you do play these games, please do leave a comment to explain to help other viewers gain more context and info.
battle.
So what does this mean for fixing or saving TF2? Well, as you can see, this is a massively complex issue, with a never-ending supply of troublemakers creating an endless problem to battle, and a company whose corporate hierarchy makes fighting that battle logistically difficult. Fixing the bot problem permanently means dedicating a team of developers to constantly upkeep the game, and that's a boring, unexciting, and thankless yet necessary task. With Valve's personal philosophy of letting developers do what they want, they'll struggle to convince anybody to want to sit down and do it. In other words, tackling this problem requires Valve to basically rework part of their company's hierarchy just for these maintenance guys. Which is... yeah, no. Let's keep things realistic here. Alright, so what can be done then? Well, other less conventional solutions do exist, though they aren't ones which are typically taken by conventional developers. The first is to outsource the fix. If Valve's own developers won't do the job, then the task might be outsourced to contractors. The quality will obviously not be as good or professional as Valve's own personal touch, but it will involve far fewer employee resources from Valve themselves, and the job still ultimately gets done, and it's far better than nothing. Think of it like with Pokemon. Pokemon Company wanted a Sinnoh remake, but Game Freak was fully occupied with Legends Arc, however you pronounce it, and Scarlet and Violet, and couldn't afford the manpower to handle such a project, so it was outsourced to Ilka. The game's quality wasn't amazing, and it was less profitable than other remakes, but it got the job done and successfully drove the franchise's overall merchandise machine. Normally, companies never resort to this because it's logistically cheaper and yields better results if they assign new and inexperienced developers to maintenance, and occasionally send in experienced developers for added support. But Valve isn't that kind of company. They don't have the management or a large supply of newbie devs. That's the problem, really. It's expensive, eternally expensive. Pokemon's own outsourcing to Ilka was at least only for a fixed duration until the Pokemon game was completed. But TF2 being a live service game means it's an endless treadmill. To outsource indefinitely can rack up exorbitant costs, and it might not be viable as a long-term solution in terms of overall cost effectiveness. The second method is to address the source. Instead of waging an endless war patching the fences, go on a direct offense against the bot hosters. As I mentioned earlier, trolls and griefers largely engage in malicious behavior because they derive enjoyment from it, and there are no consequences that prevent or punish them from doing so. But if there are proven cases of actual, tangible, real-life consequences, well, suddenly things aren't fun and games anymore. Nintendo are infamous for being extremely lawsuit-happy and overprotective of their IP, but that's just a natural consequence of this proactive approach in action, and they aren't the only ones to do so. In 2023, Bungie won a $4.3 million lawsuit against cheat seller Aim Junkies and Phoenix Digital for violating Destiny 2's DMCA's terms and illegally producing and distributing cheats for sale, profiting off the game as a result. And just over a month ago, in May 2024, Activision was awarded over $14 million in a lawsuit against the cheat maker Engine Owning, which sold cheats for many of Activision's Call of Duty games. Nintendo had also won $2.4 million in a case against the creators of the Yuzu emulator, Tropic Haze, for selling emulation access to newly released Switch games, allowing them to profit off piracy on a massive scale. This isn't a harmless emulation either. We're talking about the scale of millions of dollars of damages. Yuzu emulator access to Legend of Zelda Tears to the Kingdom was allegedly sold a week prior to the game's public release, release and was downloaded over 1 million times during that period. Legal actions like these serve to protect a company's intellectual property from malicious actors who try to abuse and profit off IP illegally. While chasing after big cases like these is difficult, they establish a precedent which threatens smaller individuals and discourages them from screwing around for fun in fear of the consequences. The problem with this is, well, it's the law. Firstly, hiring a team of lawyers is expensive. Building and fighting a case is a time-consuming matter which costs a lot of money, potentially more money than what TF2's revenue generates. Again, this might not be a financially worthwhile course of action. But secondly, and more importantly, the law itself might not make this option possible. Trying to prove and win a case against a cheat maker or a bot hoster is a complicated matter, and depending on the legal nuts and bolts, it might not be a viable course of action. I don't have enough legal knowledge myself to give an accurate answer. I don't know what US law is like. I'm a game designer, not a lawyer. I chose to pursue game design instead of law back when I graduated from my IB diploma program over 10 years ago, and I still don't regret that choice to this day. For all I know, actions such as bot hosting might not even break any laws to begin with. If anyone watching this video does know, please do tell me in the comments. Regardless, even if a case was viable, winning the case is difficult, expensive, time-consuming, and the law might be difficult to legally enforce. If the plaintiff and defendant were both American, it'd be possible for a court to enforce the ruling. But depending on the country the case is held in, that might be more troublesome. That 14 million Activision won? Yeah, they might not see a single dime of it. Engine Owning was previously sued for $3 million in the past, and since then evidently learned, as they moved their company from Germany to Dubai. And trying to get Dubai to enforce anything is a bit of a lost cause. If the TF2 bot network hoster were based in America or a legally enforceable country, the legal repercussions can be applied. But what if they are operating in Russia or Dubai or the Philippines? And did this achieve anything? Well, Engine Owning indicated it still intends to continue operating and selling Call of Duty cheats anyway. So what was all this money and time spent for? It established a legal precedent for future lawsuits, which is beneficial to future Activision legal matters and the gaming industry as a whole. But it certainly costs a lot of money just to accomplish that. Would Valve hypothetically succeeding also yield a similar result? Is that result even worth it? I've no idea. This is a long video. Let's conclude. As you can see, very complex issue. I myself wish to see a positive outcome from this, but what knowledge I do possess about the business of the game industry doesn't leave me with any blind faith, confidence, or optimism. Are Valve blameless? Of course not. Despite everything, TF2 is still a live service product that generates revenue and thus requires the appropriate maintenance. This is a necessary problem for any live service game to deal with, and if Valve is unable to handle TF2's problems, it doesn't inspire confidence for their new upcoming hero shooter game either. Is Valve solely to blame? No. Ultimately, the blame lies squarely with the ones who created the bot problem to begin with. Sometimes you blame the law, but this time you blame the criminal. At the end of the day, some people are just scum. Human scum who desire to create misery or profit off others illegally. Regular players in a game community are just third parties who are caught up in the consequences of bigger things. Can anything be done? Well, apart from 4chan style internet vigilantism, I don't know. I honestly don't. Dedicated community members such as Mega Scalebomb have taken it upon themselves to create their own anti-cheat code. But this isn't a viable or fair long-term solution either, because it shifts the burden of responsibility to a volunteer who needs to sacrifice their own time and expertise for no proper compensation. It isn't fair fair to these people for a game to rely on their own charity efforts to solve a problem which shouldn't be there in the first place. As a player, it's easy to think that just signing a petition can make a difference. But as a developer, this problem is so huge that it feels almost impossible to decisively solve. And Valve's hierarchy doesn't make solving it any easier either. Maybe they could hire community members like Mega Scatterbomb as external contractors, but these people will eventually want to move on to other things in life in the future too, and things will just return to square one. Running a live service game for nearly 20 years just isn't possible without difficulties. For many people, the best course of action has been to abandon TF2 casual entirely and seek refuge in community servers which lack bots. Return to a simpler time. Perhaps that might well be the best long-term solution for the community. In the meantime, all we can do as players is sign a petition. By calling more attention to the issue, it raises the game higher in Valve's priorities list and hopefully means the developers who do end up working on it will receive more worthwhile compensation. If you wish to sign that petition, I've included a link to it in the video description. Hopefully Valve does manage to figure out a viable long-term solution that makes sense for both them and the game's players alike. To you, my dear viewer, I bid you a good night. And to the Team Fortress 2 community, I wish you good fortune and success. Godspeed.